Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our October 1st meeting of the Council. Like always, we'll start off with our Pledge of Allegiance. Mayor, why don't you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a new student voting member with us today. His name is Eustace, and I'm going to try the last name. How does Klimovicius sound?
It's close. It's good.
Close? How do you pronounce it?
Klimovicius. Klimovicius.
Klimovicius. All right, very good. Well, welcome, Eustace. Happy to have you here as a voting member. Remember, we get a grad student and an undergrad student each year. They take turns voting, so Eustace will be our voting member. And I'm also recognizing Mayor Trotta, Linda Arman, Jim Wargo, and Chris Hahn. So we certainly have a quorum. And also want to welcome somebody I've gotten to serve on 2 search committees for, Nancy Tomes. She is the new president of the University Senate, and she is replacing Ed Feldman. So Nancy, welcome to our council.
Thank you.
You're familiar with us. We meet 4 times a year, and we really meet just to, stay on top of Sam and bust his chops wherever we can. But we need.
That's actually written in the bylaw.
No, we'll leave that to the Senate. We welcome you. We welcome you. And if you see Ed, tell him best wishes. Enjoyed Ed at these meetings over the years. There's also a new graduate student member. I don't think he's with us. James Vasallo. And if he comes in, we will point him out. And then finally, she's taken care of us all these meetings for many, many years. And Susan Grimes, this is going to be her last meeting because she is retiring.
I am.
You're
I'm
retiring?
yes.
And how many years have you been with Stony Brook?
Just about a little over 15 years.
15?
So I'm not like one of these really old timers. There's many of them. But yes, I've been in this the president's office for about 11 and a half years now, and helped the council all those years. And it's been a privilege and fun. These meetings are great. I hope I've been helpful.
You've been very helpful to all of us.
I'll miss everyone very much. But moving on.
Well, we'll miss you too.
Congratulations.
And we wish you well. Thank you, Susan, for all you've done. I've been here almost 10 years now. I know you've been here since I've been here, so we will definitely miss you. I'll miss your regular emails. But
I might send you a few here and
there. But we wish you well. Before we get to the minutes, we always appreciate Sam and having this senior leadership team here with us. So go around the horn, just make sure everybody knows who everybody is. Michael?
Michael Bernstein, Provost.
Dexter Bailey, Senior Vice President for Advancement.
Judy Grineman, Chief Deputy to the President and Senior Vice President for Government Community Relations.
Matt Whalen, Vice President for Strategic Initiatives.
Nicholas Scabetta, Vice President, Marketing Communications.
Lynn Johnson, Vice President, Human Resources.
Ernest Baptiste, CEO, University Hospital.
Good morning, Fred Skanga, Executive Director of the Long Island State Veterans Home.
Susan Blum, Chief Counsel.
Braden Hosh, Assistant Vice President for Institutional Research Planning and Effectiveness.
Laura Linenfeld, Executive Director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science.
Kevin Moriarty, Chapter President for UUP Stony Brook Center.
Carolyn Kuby, Chapter President for UUP Stony Brook EJC.
Marissa Trachtenberg, Associate Director for Policy, Compliance, and Presidential Initiatives.
Carol Mondoro, Executive Assistant to the President.
Susan Hines, President's Office.
Great. Well, thank you all. And as I said, I've recognized a quorum. Well, first order of business is the approval of the minutes from May 7th. Motion by Linda, seconded by Chris. Any comments, revisions, or additions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Eustace, you could abstain since you weren't here for that meeting, and you could vote on the minutes at the next meeting. All right. Let's see. The only thing I wanted to mention was I know some of us have some expired terms, and we have a couple of vacancies. Sam and I have been working with the governor's office, and they have begun to process some, not all. So some of you may have heard from them and gotten new applications to do all over again. And if you haven't heard yet, doesn't mean that you won't. And we're also trying to fill 2 vacancies, so they could happen soon, or they could take a little bit longer than soon. But
It's about as long as it takes.
the way the law works is, even if you have an expired term, you are a holdover until otherwise appointed or replaced. And so it's not an issue for any of our meetings. Just want to say, seems like the men's football team is off to a great start.
Yes.
So exciting. I see we beat Nova the other day.
Yes.
So that's great. Another great year of sports. Maybe the next meeting we'll get an update from Sean on things. But that is it, and I'm gonna yield all my time to Sam and his president's report.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and there's a lot to talk about. Students are back on campus. It's the most students we've ever had on campus, so we're well in excess of 26,000 now. The new class coming in, with apologies to Eustace, is the best class we've had again in terms of SAT and GPA scores. They went up again, even though it's the largest class we've ever accepted. We had nearly 38,000 applicants for this class, 37,800 to be precise, and we have about more than 3,400 coming in. We had an increase, a little less than 200 undergraduates coming in. We also overall had an increase of about 265 or more students coming in. So we've grown a little bit. We were trying to grow in some areas. In other areas, we weren't trying to shrink. We actually shrunk a little bit, so we had fewer graduate students than we did last year in a couple of areas. We're taking a look at that. But overall, it was a growth, and we did grow domestic, out-of-state, and international students in addition to growing New York State students. So the domestic and out-of-state and international students was a challenge to recruit this year, so my kudos to the people who did the recruiting, because those demographics continue to work against us. In the Northeast, the areas most of our students come from, who come from out-of-state. As you know, high school populations are going down, so there's intense competition. A couple of our competitors have now established branches on Long Island, because Long Island is such an important place to recruit. So Ohio State has Long Island. I don't know who else has set up groups on Long Island as well.
Most of the major AAUs will come to Long Island to recruit our students.
Yeah, but Ohio State actually has people assigned essentially to Long Island and so on. So
Your son goes there.
Yeah,
Your son got
yeah.
attracted there?
Kind
It's a great story. I like Michael Drake, the president. He's a friend of mine, so that's a great place. So, but the point is, it's very competitive. So I think to get this growth and to get a growth in quality, well, again, as a testimony, I think to all the things we've been doing at Stony Brook, but also our recruiters and our enrollment team, which I think is great. And we're excited about the mix of the class. As I said before, I think it maintains our diversity, and we continue to push for that as well. So I think it's very strong from all those perspectives. And I think things have generally got off to a good start for the class as well. We had a few bumps early on about some class availability and so on, but I think we've overcome a lot of that, and I think things are going well.
Is housing?
Housing, we're definitely crowded, so we had to triple more people than we've had in the past. We're de-tripling students, so we've been de-tripling students. So what happens is some students don't show up to housing that they said they were going to have. In other cases, we also opened up another 75 beds in West J. It's opened up, and so we have another 75 beds that came on board as well. So that's helping a little bit with this. But we definitely need to grow our housing stock on campus. We have a demand both for graduate student and undergraduate student housing, and so we're engaged, as we may have talked about before, in a public-private partnership to try and grow that. And I think we're moving that along, I think, in very good fashion. So we're excited about
Sam, is an increase in enrollment going against the trend for public universities?
It really depends on the place, I think. So I think where you've really seen challenges are, I would say, what I would call regional public universities, so places like, and Farmingdale actually hasn't seen a decrease in enrollment, but a place like Farmingdale has been more vulnerable. Places, again, smaller places in Ohio or Pennsylvania that aren't the flagships. Most of the flagships and AAUs are not seeing declines in enrollment. It's more the smaller regional publics that are facing this.
How about the other SUNYs?
Yes, I mean, there's some of the other SUNYs that have had challenges in enrollment, and part of that creates some of this tension around tuition because they don't want to see tuition increases because they feel cost is their competitive advantage with the privates they compete against. Well, in our case, we would like to see some form of modest tuition increase because of our cost to educate.
Right.
So, but I think, yes, it has been a challenge for some of the cities, but everybody's gone up a little bit since Excelsior started, so except the community colleges. So right now in New York State, it's the community colleges that are seeing declines in enrollment. They saw significant increases during the economic downturn.
Yeah.
They're declining again, while the four-years are actually, most of the four-years are doing a little better, but there are some specific city schools that are facing challenges. Everybody saw application increases. Binghamton actually saw the most application increases. They had a big marketing campaign that they did throughout the diaspora, articles, ads in the Chronicle, a lot of social media ads for Binghamton. So they actually drew the biggest increase. But Buffalo saw an increase in application as well. Some of that, I think, again, may be tied to Excelsior. But we still only have about 800 Excelsior students at Stony Brook, so it's not a huge part of our population. So, other questions? So the other thing is a number of departures and appointments. It's been a while since we've met. So I'm very pleased to announce that Kathy Byington, who was the Associate Vice President for Business Operations at Yale University, is coming to Stony Brook to be the Senior Vice President for Finance Administration. She has an extensive resume. She was involved in leading at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, leading finance there before she came. She was at Georgetown University, led their medical school finance before she came. So she brings, as I said, a wealth of experience both on the public and private side, and the ability to take a look at both the medical school as well as the rest of medicine as well as the rest of the enterprise. So that's a unique qualification. And so we're very excited. I want to thank Linda for serving on the search committee and some of the other people here who served on the search committee, and actually Dexter and Melissa who led it. We thank them for their participation in helping us land Kathy. She actually starts on Wednesday, so she just missed 2 days, so October 3rd will be her starting date. So hopefully she'll be at the State of the University. I don't know if I can buy it. Which, by the way, Wednesday is the State of the University for those of you who find yourself with absolutely nothing to do at work. Please come. And but so we're very excited about her, and obviously it's a critical position for the university. We have, as everyone knows, we've been facing some budget challenges, so her presence here, I think, would be very helpful. Nicole Sampson, who's a
Before we
professor.
go forward, can I just make a statement?
Yeah.
The process was amazing. It was my first time. Even I had to miss a couple meetings, but I was able to catch up quickly because of the team, and Dexter and Melissa and everybody on the team was just, and everyone that served on the committee was just so knowledgeable and engaged that I just wanted to make that for the record because it was a great process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Nicole Sampson, who's a professor in the Department of Chemistry, is now the interim dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. She's doing a spectacular job, I think, to say the least. And we will be starting a search for a new dean, and Michael will be responsible for that. So, as I said, Nicole's doing a great job as the interim. Richard Garrick has come on to, he's from the professor in the Department of Psychology, has been named interim dean of the graduate school and vice provost for graduate professional education. He's filling in for Chuck Tabor, who left to go to Kansas State to be provost there.
Oh,
yeah.
When did you leave?
How many months ago? June, yeah. So Richard has taken over, but we wish Chuck the best. He did a great job. He's been a great contributor in political science department. And then Shafiq Fazal has taken over for Constantine Costanu, who went to University of Pennsylvania to be Dean of Libraries there, and he was the Associate Dean for Library Technology, Discovery, and Digital Initiatives, so he's going to serve as interim dean as well. And then just announced recently was that Howie Shiner is leaving his post as Dean of the School of Journalism. He'll be leaving at the end of this semester, and we'll be getting this search for interim for him, and then eventually a search for replacement.
Is he retiring?
No, he's staying on.
No, he's staying on as a professor?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Because I live with a journalism student who was
Yes.
quite distressed about him leaving.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he's the the founder of the school, obviously, so I'm sure there's a sense of disruption. We founded it probably 11 years ago, 15 years ago, 10? Dozen years ago, 12 years ago. So yeah, it's always a disruption. So that's, I think, the news on comings and goings, but again, we have some great interims filling in, which is fantastic. I don't think things are skipping a beat as far as that goes. And I want to thank Matt Whalen for his help in filling in after Bob Magnus' departure, as well as Lyle Combs for their help as well. They both did a good job in interim positions. So the campaign for Stony Brook, and Dexter's the expert on that, but I'll just go through it very quickly. Our goal was $600 million, and at the end of June, we announced that we surpassed that goal by raising more than $630 million. Dexter and his team did a fantastic job. 80% of the money is in the bank, so that's always nice. 80% of the money is in the bank, that's good. But the interesting thing is about 98% of it is designated, right? So 98% of it is designed for specific things. And that, answers a question that people ask me sometimes, and they'll say, well, how can Stony Brook, why are you having a budget problem? You just raised $630 million. What's the problem? Well, the answer is that people don't give to fill the hole, what they feel is the hole in their budget, whether it's to keep the lights on, to pay salaries generally. They give because of specific things they're interested in. A faculty member they want to support in their research, a student who they want to give a fellowship for and help them graduate and help them attend Stony Brook. So there's specific things people give for. And so I think that's why, this kind of transfer doesn't work very well. For schools that have extraordinary large endowments, for schools that, like a Harvard that has a $30 billion endowment, so much money stems off of that endowment, then you can talk about filling holes and you can talk about replacing things. But even in the financial difficulty, Harvard was letting people go, even with the size of endowment they have. So universities tend not to run the basics on their endowment. They tend, again, to use philanthropy as a way to get to be excellent. So we've had a lot of good things that happened. Let me just point out a couple of things that have happened. We raised $52 million for $53 million nearly for financial aid for students, $40 million for current use, $12 million for endowed scholarships and graduate students for both undergraduates and graduates, $126 million for facilities and campus life, 44 new endowed faculty, and it must be more than that.
Newly endowed.
Well, 44 during the campaign.
Yeah.
So,
last week we're in the process of closing 3 more.
Right. $209 million for research and to support academic centers, including the Ball Center for Metabolomics and Imaging, the Institute for Advanced Computational Science, the Laufer Center for Physical and Quantitative Biology, the Ladue Center for India Studies, the Shinnecock Bay Restoration Program, the Laurie Center for Pediatric Multiple Sclerosis, and the Thomas Hartman Center for Parkinson's Research. So all of these things came to pass essentially through the campaign. And there was actually great support for the Alda Center as well, I think, through the campaign. And I think that was one of the other things that benefited. Dubin Family Athletic Performance Center, the indoor practice facility that's being built on campus as well, started funds raised during that time. So it was a great impact. And but the news is, we can't stop. So the news is we don't stop fundraising now that we did this. When we first started, when I first came here, we were averaging in the 20s in terms of millions of dollars per year. During the campaign, we went up to $80 million a year. We want to go to $100 million a year. That has to be our goal. Our peers in the AAU raise around $200 million a year, so we would still be about half of those families. So that's what we have to do. We have to build an infrastructure to get to that area. It involves hiring more people. So some schools, when they get to a campaign, they lay people off and they might fallow for a while and then they gear up again. We're going to continue to build on what we've been doing because we still are in a growth phase. Every time we hire someone, their dollars they bring in and the amount they raise far exceeds their salaries. So we're still in a good part of the curve where people raise more money than we have to pay them. And if you look at our endowment, we're about 243 million or so in endowment. Again, that puts us 61 out of 62 schools in the AAU. So, we're near the bottom. So again, this is not a knock on the kind of work we've been doing. We've done extraordinary things. We've come a long way, over really the past 10 years. We've come a very long way. The past 7 years, we've come a really long way. But we can't stop. We have to keep going. There's a lot of work to be done to get to where we need to go. I wanted to just
Sam, on that,
yeah.
the 600+ million that
Yeah.
was raised in the campaign, does any of that go to the $220 million that's known as the endowment, or
Yeah.
has it all been
Yeah.
taken?
Yeah, so the endowment in 2011 was just under 90 million. So over the course of the 7 years, that's been the growth, and some returns on investment as well. Yeah.
Got it.
I would say we did really well from an endowment standpoint in this campaign, and the other thing, which is a minor issue, which is not, Sam doesn't know, but only about 26 million came in the planned giving area. So sometimes when these institutions do large campaigns, up to 35-40% are deferred gifts. So this is cash that's come in. Our donors are prolific in their ability to complete their pledges, so our default rate is extremely low. I would probably say 2-something%. So we're doing pretty well.
Got it. And are we, do we do as well, or are we a leader in the SUNYs when it comes to
Oh yeah, in SUNY, yes.
And does any of that?
Yes, considers that a small pond.
We're number one.
We sort of compete with Buffalo as an AAU, and we compete with them on a couple of things, but we're better than them in terms of, and does any of this money hurt us in terms of the state size when we're asking for more?
I think there is a tendency, I think sometimes to, and we do hear it sometimes from people there, and they don't say it to us directly, but other people will say it, well, why is Stony Brook asking for more money? Why are they asking for increase for money for this or for that? Why don't they just have so-and-so write them a check for the thing? And that really betrays a kind of an ignorance about fundraising, but also a fundamental issue around quality, again, and building excellence. And the idea is that this isn't in lieu of, it's in addition to, and we're trying to do everything we can to be a great university for the state of New York.
Right.
And these people are investing in public higher education, right? Which is in and of itself, is something, right? They're investing in something that other people pay taxes for. They're willing to spend more to help in public higher education. So the fact that we're able to raise this money, I think, is spectacular. And we hope that City will do all it can not to penalize for us, but incent us to do it. What I'd love to see is something that the state of Connecticut did a number of years ago, which is they provided a match for the endowment. So in other words, if we raised $10 million, the state would match and add to our endowment $10 million. Is that correct? Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure I'm not making this up. I'm pretty sure it's true. So so I would love to see a program like that, which again would incent more schools to get involved in fundraising and really change the dynamic.
No, that's terrific. And as we said before, most people are giving when they're actually directing where the money's up to go.
Right.
They're not giving us money to make up for state budget shortfalls.
Correct.
So you can't use that pot of money to make up for cuts. And so we need every penny we can get from Albany.
Exactly.
Because we're not allowed to use the other monies.
Correct.
Those other monies are just to make us better.
97.8% restricted.
Good. It's good to know.
Right.
It's good to
Call the
know.
next campaign the Stony Brook Billion.
For sure. And not coincidentally, Buffalo.
Brook Billion.
Not coincidentally, Buffalo
It has a bad
announced
connotation.
I
these
was-
days.
What?
It has a bad connotation these days.
Yeah.
I think he's aware of that.
Buffalo coincidentally announced their campaign goal, and it was $650 million.
Competition's good.
Leave that without comment. So let me finish with some really great accolades that are a testimony again to the people and students at Stony Brook. So first of all, Stony Brook was named one of the best universities to work for. We were identified by Forbes as one of the top large companies of which to be employed in America. We were one of only 25 educational institutions that were recognized by this, and we were number 16 of all colleges and universities in terms of a great place to work. So again, that's wonderful. And then I think you probably saw that Stony Brook moved up 17 slots in U.S. News and World Report from 97 to 80 among U.S. colleges, national universities. And we ranked 32nd among public universities nationally. Those are both all-time highs for the universities. And we will hear today from Braden about rankings. So I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No,
I think
it's your thunder.
Everybody knew it already. Everybody knew it already. So Braden will go into it. But we had some other ones where we went up in as well. Wall Street Journal ranked 30 among public institutions. And Braden will talk about the reasons why, one of the reasons why we did better in those rankings, and I'll expand on it later. And also a very high ranking from Forbes and STEM colleges, so a number of things. And then There's a diversity magazine, a higher education and diversity HEED award. We received a national honor recognizing U.S. colleges and universities that demonstrate an outstanding commitment to diversity and inclusion. So again, we're very proud to be recipients of that HEED award. And then Kevin took the word out of my mouth. We've had a great fall so far in sports. Last year we had our best fall sports ever. This year we're off to a great start with women's volleyball, men's cross country, men and women's soccer, and men's football all playing quite well. I guess there's no women's football, but football all playing quite well to begin the season. All of them have winning records, and all of them have winning records in conference. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
That's
for a
great.
good fall. So I encourage you again to take a look at the schedule. Our women's volleyball team last year were the conference champions. Our women's soccer team was the conference champion last year. So those games are ongoing. So if you have a chance, catch one. And football have been very exciting games at LaValle Stadium. And, the Villanova game was a thrilling game for those of you who weren't there. Started off trailing 21-0 and came back and won the game. So it's very exciting.
Other than football, Sam, is every one of our sports teams, men and women, are winning in the East?
Yes. Yes, with an asterisk. And the asterisk is for tennis, I think we play, there's not enough tennis teams in the American East Conference. I think we play outside of the conference and another conference for that. But I think everything else, the same might be true for swimming, but for all the essential major sports like lacrosse, women's basketball, men's basketball, we're all American East Conference.
And Dexter, do you see when sports teams are doing well for Stony Brook, does it make it easier to fundraise for the lump? Or is there no correlation? Or
I think it does. It helps as far as like getting in front of people. Sam and I host donors in the box at football games and things like that. So I think that it does generate interest, and then we can start dialogue.
Villanova was ranked number one in the FBS.
No. They were number 15 in the so it's FCS. They were number 15 in the FCS, and we were number 20. So they were higher ranked than us. They had the best passing offense.
Well, I know they beat Temple. I know.
Yeah, they beat Temple, and they had the best passing offense in the FCS. So they led the FCS in passing.
Jim threw the Temple in there because he wants everybody to realize that BC beat Temple.
Not a big deal. Not a big deal. No.
All right.
Doug Flutie still play there now.
Yeah, statue's there.
Well, that's great.
So that concludes my report. I have any questions.
Great. Anybody have any questions for Sam? No? Great to see all good things happening, Sam. Thanks for the update. And we have a couple of reports. Yusuf, every meeting, Sam usually has somebody make presentations to us about various different departments or programs here at the school, so we get educated. We're supposed to be sort of the ambassadors out to the community, so we get educated about things so we can be saying good things and also answer any questions that we may get. And so we always get a couple of different reports. And today we have two reports. First one is on university rankings with Dr. Braden Hosh. He's the Assistant VP for Office of Institutional Research, Planning, and Effectiveness.
So, thank you very much. The Office of Institutional Research, Planning, and Effectiveness, beyond being a mouthful, is the office that helps the university understand how well we're accomplishing our mission. So we do a lot of quantitative work, from data management to some external reporting. The rankings come through my office, at least the institutional ones, lots of other research projects. So I'm very lucky to have lots of support from the president and others around campus.
And just to interrupt, this has really been transformational to the university, I would say. Matt helped spearhead bringing Braden to Stony Brook. But Braden and his team have really changed, I think, how business is done at the university. I think they give us the opportunity to be much more analytical and data-driven in our decision-making. And it's not perfect, and there's obviously many elements that come in, but having data is very powerful when you want to talk about challenging issues related to the budget, when you want to talk about the impact of programs, when you want to talk about the direction, strategic direction the university should be going, how we should be dealing with enrollment, what are the consequences of growing over here and not growing over here. These are many things that were kind of done, I think, more, without a lot of basis. In fact, often by feelings and guessing. And now I think we're really working to be much more data-driven. Again, it's not a substitute for human judgment in some areas, but it certainly is ways in which to make a much more informed decision about some very complex things we're presented with. Because again, some of the things and decisions we have to make are based on lots of information, very complex settings, and so having a strong institutional research group is really important. It's one of the areas we've invested in. I think we still even could invest a little more in it to make it more widely available to people on campus and need help in decision making. I'm really fortunate because I have immediate access to them, so that's a very strong thing for me. But I guess getting more of the campus access to them is something I would like to push in the future. But they really do an outstanding job. So
Thank you, President.
You're welcome.
So, with that, I guess we're done. No, not at all. No, I want to talk through today the context and importance of rankings. Some of the major rankings of Stony Brook. I'll actually touch on the international ones and also the domestic ones in a little bit more depth, with a more deep dive into U.S. news, because they're kind of the 25,000-pound elephant in the rankings world. I always urge people to, when you talk about rankings, start with a phrase along the lines of no single number can capture the educational excellence of a university. It's true. Universities are so complex, rich, that you just can't capture it with a single number. From there, you can pivot to what you're going to talk about, but it's always, I think, a useful thing to go on to. And the pivot from here is that we actually have the highest U.S. News ranking that we've ever had. But it's a useful thing to keep in mind because it really is just sort of an indicator at best. So let's talk context for just a second. Overall, we ask freshmen on sort of a regular basis, every couple of years, why do you come to Stony Brook? And among this set of reasons, if I were to have gone back a couple of years, rankings in national magazines would have been lower. And I'll show you that in just a second. And in fact, I've shown presentations like this where I've actually grouped it as sort of a top of the second tier. But it's now the 5th most important reason why students come to Stony Brook. And it's clearly, I think, linked to very good academic reputation as well. So I've highlighted both of those. I'm not sure you can separate those two. So it's gaining in importance, and it's actually higher than things like being admitted to a top grad school or offered financial assistance. It's higher than parents. It's higher than high school counselors. It's higher than couldn't afford other choices. So they are important, certainly in the minds of the students who are coming to us. And if we look over time on this goes back to 1995 on this data series. And what you see is that from about 1995 to 2003, except for that blip there in 1997, you have flat, if not declining importance. So very important up at the top, somewhat important in the light green, and not important in the gray. And then beginning in about 2003, 2004, you start to see things go up. This just coincidentally correlates with Stony Brook being rated in what's called the U.S. News second tier. And during that period of time, we weren't ranked numerically. This group was between about 50 and 120, depending on the year. But it's just published that way. Beginning in 2003, which was actually released in, I say it's the 2003 America's Best Colleges. It was released in 2002. The data were from 2001 and before that. So it's a publication. They play with the dates. But it starts to go up. So we were numerically ranked about back in the 120s back in 2003, and then we start going up here. Now this is a correlation. It's not causality. And as we have more students who come to us through the various channels, the rankings were more important to them. But keep in mind, it is a driver. Now, I will also say that publications don't produce rankings for love. They produce them for money. The reason why they are doing this is so that they can increase their bottom line. There's not a single entity I'm going to show you that's not for profit today. And so they are generating subscriptions. There's advertising. Some of the less prestigious rankings are generating clickbait revenue. Many of them have become data companies. They collect the data from institutions, and then they turn around and they sell it back to the institutions and to others. So they're increasingly selling the data that they collect. Consumers are using this information to make, obviously, choices about colleges, but they're also using them to go get linked up with other college services, like can you afford college, match me to the right college. And then finally, universities are looking at the rankings to advance our position in the market. So economic activities. They're not necessarily, I'm trying to provide truth. That said, U.S. News is the big, in the big black box. That's the one that most people pay attention to. They are being challenged, I think, by some other national rankings. You've got Forbes there. They've been doing this for about 10 or 12 years. Money's been doing it for about 6. Kiplinger's has been doing this for about 12. Wall Street Journal and Times Higher Ed got into this game about 3 years ago, and they've partnered up to issue out a rankings. Times Higher Education is a big major international ranker, and Washington Monthly has been doing this for about 10 or 12 years. International rankings, Times Higher Education, QS World Rankings, and the ARWU, or the Shanghai Rankings, are major providers of this information internationally, and international students actually place more importance on the rankings than domestic students do. So if I were to go back to that slide with the green bars, there's about a 10% increase among international students saying that rankings are important to them. So I'll talk briefly about those. And then there's some specialty rankings. There's pay scale, there's social mobility index, there's something that's been done by college.net, and Raj Shetty released some things last year, actually 2017, a number of others. Those I'm not going to talk about today. So where do we fall in some of these major rankings? This shows you international rankings, and I've listed these in descending order based on the international rank. So the black dots are the rank internationally. The gray dots are the rank in that ranking nationally among US institutions, and the red dots are where we fall among US publics. Now I've done this intentionally for a reason, so that you can see there's wide divergence among these different rankers based on our position internationally. So we go from 128 for the Center for World University Rankings, they're based in the United Arab Emirates, down to 349 in QS. But if you look at our US public rank in those, they're pretty close, 31, 37. And there's actually a great deal of correspondence among those public ranks. The difference is how the methodologies work and how they treat institutions in other countries. And what's actually been happening with these two, Times Higher Ed and QS, they're based in the UK, they've actually been changing their methodology sort of incrementally to disadvantage US institutions. So there's been a sort of depression in those rankings. And you know, they're trying to drive up other institutions, and some of it also has to do with who's paying for their data. Make no mistake about that. US News and World Report has a global ranking, so that's what that one is. And it doesn't have as much market penetration as these other three. There are another 15 international rankings I don't have up here, so it's a crowded field of different entities. So switching over to the domestic side, and I've done this more or less the same way, so that our national rank is the gray dot and our rank among publics is the red dot. Money Magazine is intent upon value and cost effectiveness of higher education, as is the Forbes Best Value. You'll also notice that Forbes is down here at the bottom, where we're ranked 182, where they talk about top colleges. And these are methodological differences in terms of what they're trying to emphasize in the rankings. Here they're actually talking about our out-of-state cost as they market to a national audience. Here they're using our in-state cost. US News compares us only to other, quote, national universities, basically research universities. But here in Forbes, it's everybody. So you've got the Williamses, the Amhersts, the other small liberal arts colleges. That's also true here in the Wall Street Journal Times Higher Ed ranking. So interestingly enough, Washington Monthly also, and this is another financial thing, they reduce the earnings that our graduates, they take that number and they actually reduce it because of the regional cost of living. So they are actually not giving us credit either when they do that with the cost. So it's the full cost, but then they reduce the earnings. So it's not fair. I've actually complained to them about this. But you know, they can do what they want. So that's why we don't look as good in that one. So a lot of those things sort of filter in, and I doubt you'll be able to see this, but I do have up here on this list about how these methodologies differ. Of these 6, 5 of them use graduate earnings. The source is typically pay scale or the college scorecard, both of which have very serious data quality issues. Pay scale is only about people who visited the pay scale website, and it includes no one who has a graduate degree. So you can imagine all of a sudden, this is a very tiny slice of non-representative people. The college scorecard is a hair better. It's coming from the federal government. They've actually linked back to income tax records, but it excludes anybody who didn't use the federal financial aid system. As you can imagine, those people actually tend to have different financial circumstances and different career trajectories. So those significantly inflect how some of these earnings data go through. Some of them, in fact, many of them, U.S. News, Times Higher Ed, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes all also use some sort of survey of students or of college administrators or of high school counselors. And so that also influences things. And I am going to talk a little bit more about reputation, especially as it reflects U.S. News. So all said and done, as you think about the methodology on these things, and as you talk about rankings of Stony Brook with others, recognize that how you do it matters and will affect the result. Now this is Stony Brook's U.S. News rank over time. And I've started back with our first numeric rank at 123, and I'm ending here with 80 plus a forecast for the future. So let's talk back here. In the first couple of years of this, the graduation rates are not included. In fact, the federal government didn't start measuring graduation rates until 2000, 2001. They started to include them sort of mid-decade there. And what you see is that as this ranking kind of goes up, we then plateau for about 5 or 6 years. That dip down to 111 in the 2012 issue was actually a reporting issue on our part. We didn't turn in a survey. And so there was no financial information, and so whipsaw. Really and truly, it would have probably easily been in the 90s somewhere. And then it starts to increase up, 92, 82. That's where SUNY 2020 kicks in. When we start to add in faculty, we add in faculty more quickly than we add in students. And it improves a number of things, including the class sizes, it improves the student-faculty ratio, it actually also improves the amount of spending per student, which is also really important. Then, as we go through the next, the other thing that's important there is that our grad rates are also starting to go up. So graduation rates matter. They start to go up, but starting in 2015, the graduation rate for the undergraduates who entered in Southampton in 2007 end up in our graduation rate. It's a 4-year average for this. And that actually weighs things down a little bit. We add students while we've more or less entered in all the faculty, and we can't more or less come back to where we were. Enter 2019. A couple of things happen. The Southampton graduation rate drops off. Our graduation rates continue to improve, and I won't steal the president's thunder for later this week, but I think he'll be talking about some good news about our graduation rates. Those continue to go up, and there's some methodology changes that include social mobility. So sometimes methodological changes hurt you, sometimes they help you. So one component of this includes the graduation rate of Pell students and the gap between Pell students and non-Pell students. We rank number 21 and number 30 in the country, respectively, on those in the U.S. News method. So that's what's going on, and we're forecasting because of those methodological changes, and I should say all other things being equal, as I look back at my economist provost there, all other things being equal, ceteris paribus, we would anticipate that we're going to be in the high 70s to low 80s, is what we think. You probably won't be able to see this from the back, but I put this up here to sort of illustrate the company that we're in. And the validity of rankings kind of depends upon who are you paired with. This is the 2018 edition. We're tied with Buffalo, Oklahoma, Rochester Institute of Technology, SUNY Environmental Science, and Vermont. The methodological change for institutions in this particular part of the ranking tended to raise the ranking, better ranking for public universities, and depress private universities, just in general. And it had to do with the social mobility indicators that they put in. So Stony Brook jumped 17 places, but UC Riverside jumped 38. What else do we see? So Binghamton was up 7, UC Santa Cruz up 11, Florida State up 11. It's clearly not entirely public. You see Loyola Chicago go up, Howard go up, but they're serving lots of low-income students. That's what's happening. So I also call to your attention, up here we're sort of behind places like Delaware, Binghamton. Now we're tied with Binghamton, we're ahead of Delaware. So quickly on the components. So graduation and retention rates, are worth just over a quarter, 27%. The 1 year change on this is 36 places. That's huge. That's huge. And you see us going along there where we start off at 133 in the ranked 133 on that indicator. And these percentages change over time, so recognize that. But we jump up 36 spots from last year to this year to number 74 among national universities. There's another indicator, and that one's smooth. The top one is smooth over a 4-year average. This is a 1-year measure, and again, it bounces quite a bit. We're up 34 spots this year. This is the actual to expected graduation rate. So they calculate an expected graduation rate, and then your over or under performance gets ranked. So those two together end up being 35% of the rankings, how you do on graduation rates. The next one, faculty resources, has been relatively steady, and then starts to go up again with SUNY 2020, and then starts to go down a little bit. Some of that has to do with the way faculty salaries are in there. So faculty salaries represent 8% of this, and then there's also class sizes and student-faculty ratio. Depending on when the faculty salary UUP increase gets processed, that will affect this for next year. So that's some of my uncertainty for next year is the timing of that, because if it doesn't hit by the right date, we don't get credit for it. Financial resources, again, you see that whipsaw where we didn't get things reported. We've been relatively steady across that one over time. I'm also going to talk in a little bit more depth about the peer assessment, which is the ranking that other presidents, provosts, admissions deans provide for our institution, which has been relatively steady, although it's tough to see on this particular slide. We're actually up 9 spots on this. It's worth 15% of the ranking. Makes a huge difference, and some of the efforts that we've done with marketing and communications have an effect there. Also, there's a high school counselor ranking. That's worth just 5%, but we're up 20 spots there. And again, that's really important both for recruiting and as well as this ranking, because they help direct students into our institution, and again, the efforts from marketing and communications have had an effect. Student excellence is actually down 5 spots. It's reduced a little bit in terms of weighting. That's really sort of the SAT change last year. There's a whole lot of filtering around. I wouldn't put any stock in that at all, just to be totally honest. That's a blip, and I rather expect it will go up next year. And finally, alumni giving, and this is not real, I should say. There's a methodology change here too, or a methodology effect. A few years ago, they changed to use standards from the Voluntary Survey of Education, and we just finally realigned our reporting to it this year. So we actually saw a decrease in the way that we were counting, but alumni giving is exactly the same. So I don't want you to think that this is an actual decline in alumni giving. It's us truing up to the methodology of the survey. So I want to spend a little bit of extra time on graduation rates, the reputation piece, and then close out. I'm going to probably go through the last 5 slides really fast just to make sure that we stay on time. Our forecast for graduation rates is actually up over the next 4 years, and it is a 4-year moving average, so it will kind of slowly go in, and it will float our ranking for some time. So that's all good news, and it's more or less in the bank. So our 6-year graduate, we will only add about 3% from the 5-year rate to the 6-year rate, so I feel very comfortable with those forecasts. The retention rate's been pretty steady, and this is the illustration of our Pell graduation rate, and this is just a remarkable thing to talk about with people. It is very unusual for an institution to have their students who receive Pell Grants, these are the neediest students, graduate at even the same rate, much less a higher rate than students who do not receive Pell Grants. The national gap is somewhere between 8 and 10 points the other direction. So a remarkable thing for us, and very good for us in terms of ranking. And then this illustrates that actual to expected piece, and again the methodology changes matter. Back in 2007, 2008, 2009 issues, they did not include some of the adjustments that they have in the last couple of years. Starting in 2010 class, they started to factor in the number of STEM students you have in that expected graduation rate. So that's why the expected grad rate dropped, even though the qualifications of our students increased. And then they added in some additional things about Pell students in this most recent year. So we're again benefiting from some of their methodology changes in these gaps. So I don't know if they're going to keep that constant, but if they do, that's the forecast for the future. So we'll do relatively well. peer assessment, and then I'll quickly wrap up and have some time for questions. Peer assessment is worth about 1/6 of the ranking. And you see we're tracking along at 3.2, 3.2, 3.2, 3.2, this most recent year 3.3. It's an incredibly hard measure to move, incredibly hard to move. In fact, only 23 moved it by 0.1 over the past 6 years in sort of our band of institutions. And so I think, again, that's a direct result of some of the work that we've done in Nicholas's team in marketing and communications. I'll show you some detail on that to see where it happens. Again, with counselor assessment, we also see a bump of about 20 spots there.
Hey, Brad,
and 3.8 is the highest number.
Can you explain what peer assessment is? Is this
Sure.
people then pulling up Sam and Sam giving his opinions on what other colleges do? Or
There's a survey that US News sends out to all college presidents, all provosts, and all heads of undergraduate admissions. And then they respond on a scale of 1 to 5, what's the ranking of all of these? There was actually a scandal probably about 10 years ago with Clemson, where they were trying to game these.
And we're very objective when we fill out this.
Yes. Yes, you are. I mean, some institutions have tried to game these, and some have tried to get called out publicly. They're hard to game. They're hard to do that way. Ultimately, the response rates are lackluster. There's somewhere between 80 and 100 people who respond every year, so they do a multi-year average on these two. But what you see for us is the admissions deans actually tick up from being 116, I think that's 2016, all the way up to number 90. That's 3.32, which is much, much better than we've ever been in the past. The provosts and presidents have been relatively constant, although, and this is hard to see, but we're actually up in the top quartile much more firmly than we were before on that one. And part of that's because other institutions got rated lower. But it's resulted in this tick up here so that we're number 71 overall. And that helps raise everything up. It's very important. I'm going to skip through some of this other stuff because it gets really technical. But I'm happy to entertain questions of it. This is faculty resources. There's class size is a metric. They talk about the percentage who hold terminal degrees, the percentage who are full-time, average salary and benefits. That's regionally adjusted with a Runsheimer's regional adjustment. It's tough to come up with. And then the student-faculty ratio, which improved with SUNY 2020, and then we've added more students who get to participate in the educational experience, and we haven't had the resources to add faculty to keep up with them. So we're kind of back where we were. We added in 10% of faculty, we've grown 10% of students. Here we are. We need SUNY 2030. SUNY,
working on it.
Yes, exactly. Then let's see, the student excellence. What's important about this is that they finally removed what's called the selectivity measure. So there was a measure where you take the number of applications and the number of admissions. You divide admissions by applications. Basically, how many people you reject. How selective are you? That's finally been pulled out of US News. It was controversial when people were gaming that. It's probably a good thing. Financial resources, and again, some of the top line number here is actually real as far as US News is. I'm having to estimate some of these others because their methodology isn't totally clear. But at spending $42,466 per student, the reason why I have this up here is that it helps you recognize the challenge of tuition doesn't even come close to covering that. Not even close. And then this is the alumni piece that I talked about before. And again, that's methodology more than anything else. So just to wrap up, we're going to forecast that the US News rankings should be, there might be a little bit of improvement, especially if we get the UUP salary increase in early rather than later in the fall. That should help boost things, but there's going to be some downward pressure from class sizes, spending per student. So if we've got financial pressures, that actually works against us. And so I think that's generally speaking good news for us. I don't see much downside, but again, you never know. They can change this. And then finally, and the president has said this more than once, but managing towards mission is more important than managing towards rankings. Managing towards the rankings, it can get you some short-term gain, but it doesn't build you a strong institution. If you manage toward the goals of higher graduation rates, academic excellence, world-class faculty, world-class healthcare, diversity, the rankings take care of themselves. And I think that that's really kind of played out over the past decade. as we've seen the increase. So I'm happy to entertain questions.
Great, well, thank you. I have three to start off.
Okay.
First on the, I know some colleges really rely on international students to make their numbers. Out of our 26,000 students, how many are international, do we know? Is it under 10%?
17.
17%?
So it's 19% overall. So there's a difference grad, undergrad. It's about 4,500 international students.
All right, so in terms of our international rankings not being as great as our domestic rankings, does that impact our ability to recruit international students?
I think they are very focused on rankings, I think, but they also focus on the U.S. news to some degree too. So I think us going up in U.S. news will
That's a good thing.
help. And then, as we've talked about many times, and someone independently brought this up the other day, we have a very strong, we punch above our weight in China because of CNA. It's amazing to say, but I ran into someone again from China who I was talking to, and I said, Stony Brook University. He said, oh, CNA. It's still in the textbooks. It's still in people reading about it. So I think we have an advantage there. But for the rest of the world, I think, as Braden said, I think the challenge with the international rankings is there's so many schools in it, and depending on the methodology, it's easy to go from being 100 to 300 based on whatever you do. So, but I think they do pay attention to these things, and anytime we go up, it's probably helpful, and they will pay attention.
Thanks. Second question I had was on the Pell students. The fact that we do better, is that because are we picking much smarter kids in need of money, or is it because we have programs to help them reach that graduation rate, which is better than our peers?
I think it's a great question. It's one we talk about a lot, and I think part of it is related to some of the programs we have. I think that's a big part of it. And I always talk about our EOP program, which, though not huge, I think has a real halo effect, because I think if you bring a cohort of students in, and coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, we give them great mentorship, great tutoring, but also teach study habits, how to better study, part of the boot camp when they come to the summers, how to study. I think that tends to have a halo effect to other students who they get to know, who they hang out with, who they see how they're behaving, so I think that helps the university as a whole. I think it's about expectations. I think it's about, because we've succeeded, when students come in, our faculty expect they're going to perform. We don't downgrade anybody in terms of our expectations and how well we think they're going to perceive, and I think that's actually helpful. And then I think trying to create an environment where you don't feel isolated or alone. I think the diversity of our undergraduate student body helps with that. When you come on campus and you may not feel isolated or alone. And so I think all of these things are helpful in our experience just in having such a large quantity of Pell eligible, more than about a third of our class being Pell eligible. I think that helps too. Again, this feeling that you're not the only person. So it's not like, if you read people's accounts, people who are Pell eligible and students who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, it can be very difficult when they talk about what are you going to do on the weekend, and their friends are going back home to nice houses and so on. There can be a feeling of isolation, of not belonging, of imposter syndrome. As we say, and I think when you come to Stony Brook, you're around a lot of students who are in the same status that you are. So I think that's helpful in ensuring success too. And I think the fact again that we are close to this great this incredible area in Flushing and Queens and Brooklyn, where we have all sorts of first-generation students who are coming from families again that value education, that see Stony Brook as the pathway to economic success and the pathway to success in the U.S. I think that helps too. That kind of attitude of we're taking education seriously. They're here to get a degree. This is what they want to do, and I think that helps us. So I think all these things come together, but it is remarkable.
Yeah.
And but again, I give a lot of credit again to the students and the faculty, I think, and staff who I think really do a good job here and really help our students succeed.
Great. Thanks, Sam. That was a great answer, and we should be proud of those numbers. My last question, Brandon, is I know U.S. News also sometimes, maybe some of the other magazines, rank individual programs. And some people go to a particular college just because they have the best business program, or the best journalism program, the best engineering program. What programs stand out for Stony Brook in any of the rankings?
So U.S. News rankings on the programmatic side are all graduate programs, not undergraduate programs. We do particularly well in some of the math, physics areas, also biology, the physician assistant programs, particularly highly ranked. But again, those are all pushing towards sort of the graduate area. We even stand out on some of the humanities programs. So most of them are in the top 100 U.S. news-wise. The thing to keep in mind is that those are all reputation surveys. So they're sending out a survey to a chair of a department saying, rank all the other departments. So it's really a popularity contest based on what people know about others. There's almost no measurement involved in terms of outputs.
And the classic anecdote about that was the survey that they sent out, and they said rank these law schools, and so they had a series of law schools to rank, and Penn State's law school came in around 40 or something on that ranking. Penn State doesn't have a law school. so the people ranking figured what they knew about Penn State, it would be around 40, so they just started ranking. Right. So, I think that's a true story, but it tells you a little bit about the reputation.
So don't put a lot of weight into the rankings of programs.
I think they're you have to put weight in them because they matter to students. So if you look at how they rank law schools, for example, the law schools are fighting like crazy to be in the top 20. They all want to be in the top 20. And I remember, at WashU, the discussion about, well, we were 19, but then we were 21, and the difference one might see in applications and the quality of students based on that. So I think in those settings, you have to pay attention to it, but I think what Braden said and what you emphasized as well is really important, is that you can't manage to those rankings. If you really turn out great lawyers and have scholarly output from your law school that's nationally recognized, and have great placement for your graduates from a law school, then your rankings will probably go up and the quality of the inputs will go up. But for those schools, it's hard to budge these kind of things because there really is a lot of misreputation in the case.
Great. Anybody else, Linda?
I could just tell you, I'm going through this again. I have a senior again, and they're all talking right now because they have to get all their essays done. And what they're all talking, Stony Brook comes up a lot, Long Island schools, and I'm in a very good school district. And what they're all talking about is classmates before them that are happy.
Yep.
Oh, so-and-so went there, they really liked it. And that seems to weigh a lot more than some of the rankings and stuff. They talk about the rankings, they all Google the rankings and make sure that, but the guidance counselors, the schools that come to the high school and meet with the kids at the high school is big. They all sign up for that stuff. And then where people are happy and adjusting well, when they hear the kids that don't like it, those schools go down a lot. So that word of mouth, I think, is really, really important. And I think we have a good reputation on Long Island for that.
Very good to hear. Anybody else?
Can we get a copy of have this emailed to us? Because there's a lot of information in there to absorb.
Is that Brandon?
Is that
possible?
possible? For a copy of either one.
Send it to Susan, and Susan or Carol will send it out to us.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Frank. All right, Braden, thank you very much. Next up, we have Laura Lindenfeld. She is the Executive Director of the Alan Aldous Center for Communicating Science.
Just a very quick introduction. This has been, an extraordinarily impactful program at Stony Brook, and one that has really brought us national recognition. And it started before I came Shirley Kenny with Alan Alda, founded in the School of Journalism, and has had extraordinary success, as I said. It's actually kind of become almost then became a provostial center, essentially, because it's been so cross-campus and so multidisciplinary in the kinds of things it's trying to do. So it's really housed now under the provost office, and Laura has been the executive director and professor now for how many years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, and working with Dexter and others has really created a new model, which we'll talk about. Yes, good.
Yes,
which we'll talk about today. Not want to say something you're not going to talk about. Created a new model for how the center works, which has actually, I think, been fantastic. And I think there's a model we may want to look at for other centers that are publicly facing and are outreaching outside the campus in order to have them get kind of the flexibility they need to adjust to market situations. So with that, take it away.
Thank you. What you may not know about me is that I am from Long Island, and I moved away for a long time. My whole family, my grandparents were the first people to sign up for Levitt houses, move out from Queens and the Bronx to Long Island and raise their families here. I grew up in Nassau County and then moved away. And what I knew of Suffolk was either going out in the summers with my grandfather, who was an East Bay angler on his boat to fish flounder or bluefish, or to visit my aunt, who lived in the M section of Stony Brook, my Aunt Kat. Raised her 3 kids here. You may know kids who went to school with her kids. I didn't know there was a university here. I had no idea. And then I moved away because my dad did a PhD. We moved to Logan, Utah, which as a child I thought was the most diverse place in the world because they put us in international student housing. That's another story for another time. But I didn't come back here until 2.5 years ago. Had been faculty at University of Maine. I ran a public policy research center, so I understand a lot about local and state economic development. And when I saw the opportunity to take on this center, I jumped at it. So I'm thrilled to be back here, and I'd like to give you a sense of the journey I've had with the Alda Center and where we've gone and where we're going, because I may have the coolest job on campus. I may. I know those of you who work on campus are quite familiar with us. I don't know some of you. How familiar are you with the Alda Center?
I'm aware of the contest, the flame.
So what do you know about it? What do you know about what we do?
I think I know the mission. To make science understandable, to have it communicated well.
Such a light lift, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm going to take you through maybe a little more of the detail of what we do, how we do it. Oftentimes when we go out, we do about 120 workshops around the globe now. We travel, and I'll get into the details of this public-private partnership that we've formed. And I'll ask groups, who knows who Alan Alda is? And depending on the constituents and the audience, sometimes no hands go up, sometimes most hands go up. I suspect you all know Alan Alda. Well, there he is. Alan is so incredibly proud of the center and proud to be affiliated with Stony Brook University. It started, as you said, Sam, in 2009. We're going on our 10th anniversary. We've had the privilege of training over 12,000 scientists and medical professionals across the U.S., now increasingly internationally. I think we've been to 6 countries, but who's counting? And when I say trained, I don't mean large groups of 500 people. I think we've reached over 100,000 people in larger groups. I'm talking face-to-face, hands-on, 1-, 2-, and 3-day instruction at a ratio of 8 participants to 1 instructor. So we really get to know people and we really get to know places. I think I'll let Alan say a little bit about what the center does, and then we can go back to me if you don't mind playing this. It's probably easier from the computer. Whoops. I think you have to actually hover into the, there you go. Thank you.
I had done this television show all about science on public television called Scientific American Frontiers.
Hi, I'm Alan Alda, about to launch what promises to be a challenging new adventure as host of Scientific American Frontiers. I got loose. From now on, it's just sort of a normal walk, is that right?
During Frontiers' 11 seasons, Alan met hundreds of scientists, humanizing both them and their science.
Oh boy, that's like, now I'm playing the part of Richard Dreyfuss. I know you come here every day and you kind of like the way they look now, but I'm telling you, I just got here and
You should be here 30 days and you like them.
Yeah, right, okay.
How is it different? Show me how it's different.
It's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, it's
little
fatter.
slower, but you know, it's much younger in spirit.
We have this giant scientific laboratory devoted to putting sentences through Jell-O.
That's roughly right.
I'm amazed I didn't come up with that.
We like to use fancier words because it's impressive and it costs a lot of money. But basically, you're taking little molecular sentences and putting them through Jell-O.
And when the show was over, I realized that I had had such a good relationship on camera with these scientists because it was just a conversation between me and them. They weren't giving lectures. I didn't give them questions that were softballs they could hit out of the park. I really wanted to understand it myself. And that forced them to drop the lecture and really concentrate on me. They had a relationship with me. And I don't know if I was on an airplane or there was some moment where I thought to myself, they should be able to do this without somebody standing there pulling it out of them. Why can't we train scientists to have that relationship with the people they're communicating with? Whether they're talking to them or writing for them, it's the same thing. There's somebody at the other end of your keyboard, listening, wanting to understand. Are you aware of where they are in their head as you communicate with them? Why can't we train scientists, while we're training them to be scientists, train them to be good communicators? Everything would benefit. Science would benefit. Funding would get better. Congress would suddenly understand what scientists want the money for. And other scientists would understand scientists who are not exactly in their field. Everything would improve. And we'd have, the best thing was people like me, the ordinary people who are not trained in science. We'd have this wonderful chance to understand the beauties of nature in a way that only scientists understand it.
My favorite moment of this video is when Alan Alda calls himself an ordinary person.
Yeah.
Far from ordinary. He's quite extraordinary and he's deeply involved. I don't think a day goes by that I don't get at least one text. He really, really cares about this work. It's his favorite thing that he does. We use this video when we host workshops. And I'm going to ask you the question that we ask participants. What do you notice about the scientists in these videos? What strikes you about them?
They like what they're doing.
They like what they're doing?
They're engaged.
They're engaged? What else?
Seem like ordinary folks.
Yeah. Their tone is conversational, it's comfortable, they're interacting with Alan. I remember him describing the scene where he was interviewing a woman on camera and she was very animated. He's so easy to talk to. I've had to learn how to talk into a teleprompter, and if you haven't done that, it's a really hard thing to do, and I'm not very good at it. I'm not a trained actor. And what I wound up doing is having Alan interview me, which is a joy. And you react differently when there's another person or you imagine another person on the other end of the camera. What we're after is connection, relating to people and communicating about complex ideas in ways that genuinely land with your audience so that they can sense that you care about them. That's really what we do. And we do that through improvisational theater training, which is super cool. So Alan had noticed this woman on the camera. When she could make eye contact with him, everything was fine. And then she would see the camera and what would happen? She'd go into talking head mode and he'd kind of coax her back. And it occurred to him, if we use the improv training that I had as a young actor, it might really help for people to learn how to present the stories without having to have it drawn out of them. There's this concept, and I'm going to tell you a story about the Alda Center's trajectory, but also about what's happening with science communication in this country. There's a lot of attention, and to give away the line, we are the preeminent leader in this field right now. We're the only organization that trains so many people that's housed at a Research One university and doing training and research that's focused both internally and externally. We are clearly in the leadership role, and for that, I'm extremely grateful for the support that we've got to do something quite innovative. There's this concept called the science deficit model. Are you familiar with that? Have you heard this term come up? What it means is there's this idea that we can just spray information at people and it's going to stick. If you don't understand, if I can just fill you up with knowledge, it's all going to be okay. But that's not how we learn. We learn because we remember and we have some kind of emotion attached to memory. If you think about the things that have really stuck with you in your life, they're probably because you had some kind of emotional experience. So when we just pour information and it's like a leaky bucket and it all comes out. Alan calls it the spray can theory. I'm just going to spray information at you, and he says, that's not communication, that's excommunication. So the Alda method is really designed to foster connection through empathy. And what improv does is it puts us present in the moment and helps us seek to understand who are you and how might I reach across with information that I have to talk about it in a way or write about it in a way that will land with you. What we see in these workshops that we do, sometimes we get to go in and work with people for 2 or 3 days, which is really a treat. We were just at Mississippi State. We had pretty significant efforts surrounding this workshop. And by the end of the 3 days, you can see a real transformation in people and their ability to understand who is my audience and what might they be thinking And what happens is the words come out of your mouth differently. It sparks, and you said it, they seem engaged and interested, they seem passionate. We find that the scientists who we talk to afterwards, they rediscover their passion for why they signed up to do this work in the first place. So we use improvisational theater techniques. How many of you have actually experienced a workshop?
Well, I'm a professional improv comic.
You are? Oh boy, I'm going to sign you up. Come work with us.
You've seen it?
Well,
She's seen it.
I'd be delighted to do some with you sometime. There's probably not enough time today. When we say improv, a lot of people immediately think comedy, and that's certainly an aspect of improv, but that's not what we're after. We're after connection and presence. So it may be that the improv makes you funnier if you're naturally funny, which, geez, I hope I am. Wouldn't that be sad if I wasn't? But really, it's supposed to make you more genuine and true and loyal to who you are, which makes you more interesting as someone presenting or talking. So that's why we use improv, and it's carefully, we call it scaffolding in the pedagogical world, that we build it up so that we don't walk in the room. Can you imagine you walk into a group of 16 scientists and they're all sitting there like, oh my goodness, she gonna put me on stage? And we slowly build up the skill set so that people get to experience improv and then move toward things that might seem a little more intimidating to them gradually. We formed, and this is what Sam was talking about, a really unique model with this center. So what happened, I'm looking at Susan, Lynn, Dexter, Michael, and Sam. We spent a lot of time interacting, Susan especially, some early mornings on the train. We formed a public-private partnership with a company that Alan started called Alta Communication Training. He likes to say it's ACT. The man is 83 years old and I can't keep up with him. What happens is we've put ourselves more in the position of becoming a research and development unit that creates intellectual property, and we share that with Alan's company that can commercialize this. We've seen the prices that we're able to charge through the company go up. Our bookings have gone up. I mean, sometimes we're doing 3 or 4 different events a week all over the world. It's fascinating. Norway, Ireland, Scotland, Israel. Where else are we going? Berlin with the Gates Foundation. I'll come to that in a little bit. What's so fabulous about this model, and we have a formalized arrangement where the company books us to deliver some of the work, but we also certify other instructors to send on the road. It's allowing us to grow, and it's also allowed me as director to focus more of our efforts on Stony Brook here and think about how we can create scalable models. As I listened to the information this morning about our rankings and our growth, I see incredible ways to expand on the basis that we've established with communicating science toward other areas through this company. Are you familiar with Alan's podcast? Have you listened to it, Judy? Yes. It's called Clear and Vivid. It looks like Clear plus Vivid. You should download it. You might be the millionth person. Every time I see him, he's like, we're almost at 1 million. The guy really wants to make this fabulous. And all of the proceeds above the profit margin from the company, including the money that comes in through the podcast, get donated to Stony Brook Foundation, to the Alda Center. He's very inspired by the Paul Newman model. So it's a profit-driven company, but always trying to bring money back to the center to expand our reach. I think we're about $5 million into our $25 million goal. We're going to get there. And if I don't watch it, Alan's going to double it to $50 million. So this has been a really unique and innovative model. It's something that I studied before I got here. My research focused on community university partnerships. And I always wanted to find ways to create more nimble and adept partnerships for universities, especially public universities. So the idea that I would come back to Long Island, live 10 miles from my aunt, who's now in the South Shore, and be able to form a public-private partnership that's feeding back is really phenomenal. Just going to give you a taste of where we've been. I'm happy to provide a longer list. We have been all over this country. Harvard, NASA is one of our biggest clients that we book with. Union of Concerned Scientists, Cornell. I mean, this is just, you can imagine if we do over 100 of these a year, the different places that we go. And some groups bring us back over and over and over again, which means we're constantly designing new content. One of the other things I want to say that was a real benefit about the formation of this company was that it let us set really high levels of quality for what our curriculum is and to standardize it, which means we can now study it and show what kind of impact that curriculum has on the scientists that we trained. And this has been a really remarkable ride, especially this past year. I feel like, and Dexter, I see you shaking your head, I feel like what's happened since we standardized our curriculum, there's also true concern in the US about funding for science. I think the legacy of Alan's work and investment and Stony Brook's investment over the last 10 years has started to reach a point where we're recognized. People will say to me, you guys are the industry leader. That feels so great to hear. So we've seen a shift. We've seen a shift from individual workshop bookings toward partnerships. And these are some of the partnerships that we've managed to establish. Very powerful connections. I'll give you a couple of examples. The Kavli Foundation, which tends to fund physics and neuroscience, is one of the leaders, I think, in the philanthropic world around science communication and engagement. And we've received money from them for years to create an interactive website for online learning. More recently, they've recognized that we need to understand the perceptions of scientists and what it would take for them to engage. So we recently launched, with funding from Kavli, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, who's brand new to this science communication table, and Burroughs Welcome, a study of scientists, STEM professionals at all AAU schools we sampled to get a sense of what are they willing to do. The survey launched like 2 weeks ago, and it will then get shared once we get this really robust, we've got a robust sampling strategy for this AAU part of the study. It will go to hundreds of thousands of STEM members of different associations. The Zuckerman Institute, Mort Zuckerman, are you familiar with Mort Zuckerman? He has funded, I think it's $100 million between the US and Israel to foster scientific partnerships. And we approached him, he's a friend of Alan's, and said, would you consider having us come in and bolster this investment through science communication training? So over 2 years, this is the second year of this project now, we're working with postdoctoral researchers who are Americans in Israel doing their research at Israeli institutions. And they also have Israeli postdocs who have come here. And it's just been a marvelous partnership that also involves research and assessment. And then most recently, I don't even think this one is up there, but I'll mention it because it's really cool, is the Gates Foundation has signed a $250,000 contract with our partner company, Alda Communication Training, which hires us. We have a postdoc funded through this, and we'll be doing training with their vaccination and immunization researchers. So we're about to set off in 2 weeks to go to the Grand Challenges meeting in Berlin. It's unbelievable what's happening with the center and who calls us up. Packard, Bloomberg has funded some work around designing training in climate change communication specifically. These calls keep coming in, and I've really seen a big shift. I'd even say in the past 6 to 9 months, a lot of these relationships have been established. So when I think about the conversation about endowment, and where these kinds of partnerships that are maybe 6 months to a few years old can help the Alda Center grow and continue to grow as a leader in this domain, the sky's the limit for Stony Brook and the Alda Center. This is a little bit of the coverage from our trip to Israel last year, where Alan gave a talk at the Technion University. He had a blast. I tried to get him to eat cucumbers, and he said he wouldn't. They're slimy. What else are you going to eat in Israel? So we'll be back there again this year, I think at Tel Aviv University. I really see us as a leader in this field, and I'm so grateful for the support that we've received here. I do think this partner company, this was a risk. I think it was a risk worth taking. The first year, many of you in the business community would know how hard it is for a startup to succeed. The profit generated has already gone into our Stony Brook Foundation account, and Alan was so proud. He pulled it out at our holiday party, and then my development director quickly ripped it out of my hand and it got deposited. But what that does is it allows us to reinvest in our work and grow. To the point about investing to be able to continue to grow, it's critical to have that fundamental capacity. And what I see happening with the center, we have about 20 full-time employees now, staff and faculty who work, I think, in amazing harmony together, many of whom are traveling around the world right now. I just see an unbelievably bright future for this center and this work. So I'm grateful, and Alan told me expressly to express my thanks to you, Sam, for your leadership and willingness to go on this incredible adventure with us, with the Alda Center. I have some thoughts about the future that I thought I would close with and then give some time for questions and conversation. Right now, we train scientists to communicate clearly and vividly. That's our mission. I think there are opportunities to support every single student at Stony Brook with some form of this training, whether they're STEM or non-STEM. I think we're able to build our medical communication training program, which is significant with Alan's name and experience as a famous TV doctor and someone whose life was saved by a doctor who was empathic and clear with him. That profoundly affected him. I think that there's an opportunity for us to serve the Long Island business community more directly and economic development in the state of New York, which as a girl from New York, I really care about. Bringing innovative models that support this university and its relationship to the community. And I think we might be able to build on the partnership with Alan's company to imagine different kinds of professional development certificates and badges and trainings that we get to template and trial here. This is our laboratory, Stony Brook University, our laboratory in our home that we want to give back to, and to be able to scale that so it can be shared through curriculum, tuition-bearing credits, and maybe even other models more broadly internationally. Talk about going far beyond, right? So here I am back on Long Island, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
What department is the center under? Or is it under the president's office?
It's the provost.
Oh, it's under the provost.
office.
Yeah.
The center reports, Laura reports to the provost, and her role is director of the center.
Got it. And are you guys already training folks in Ernie's shop at the hospital or in the science departments here to get them used to explaining things to us non-scientists?
We are. I think we're doing some. I'd like to do more. I'd like to figure out ways, and part of this has sometimes to do with tuition and the way tuition works, especially for PhD students. We do trainings for faculty and staff fairly regularly. What's happened through this public-private partnership is it's allowed us to bring in enough resources to match our state funding, and our development work has been really profound this past year. It's put us in a solid position where I believe we're ready to turn more of our attention to scaling up within the university. But we needed to get to some kind of budget stability, and I really think we're there. After 2 years of experimenting, we've stabilized. So I'd like to see this as offerings that everyone could take and that we have the resources to be able to support all students. I also think there's a way to enhance and bolster undergraduates' experience on this campus so that, if you could imagine an added certificate, kind of like a lot of universities have honors degrees, if we had something like this with communication, teamwork, conflict management, negotiation, all of these skills that you could add on top of your degree, I think it'd be wonderful to expand that across the campus. We're in earlier stages with medical and the hospital, and I have a wonderful partner over there, Sushmita Pogi from Stony Brook Children's. She's just fantastic. We were in the PwC studio on Friday shooting some footage with Alan. I think that was a highlight for all three of us to see the leadership that she's taken on to help advance medical.
Good. Thanks, Laura. Anybody else?
I think it's great. I mean, I tell people I tell people that improv is like the most important skill I've ever learned, more than my law degree, because it allows me to communicate. I think people don't understand it's not winging it.
No, it's not. It's
reacting at the top of your intelligence, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing here. Congratulations. I think you're probably advanced on it. I encourage everybody to take it and read. I'm a firm believer of a book called Truth and Comedy by Del Close. I don't know if you guys use it, but it's, to me, you don't think, you react. And whenever I go into a green room and I see somebody writing out notes and things they think they're going to say on the air, I know I'm going to chew them apart, because you really can't plan what you're going to say in an interview. It's a conversation, it's a reaction. So
It
great.
is, that's exactly right.
Yeah, great work.
Would be delighted to welcome you into, I'd love to hear
come
what you
down.
think.
I think it's
Please
awesome.
do.
I would love it.
It'd be fun.
Thanks.
And Jack Marburger, who was president of this institution and president of BNL, was one of the great scientist to non-scientist communicators, I think, on the planet. And I remember when I first started working for Senator Schumer and having to work at BNL, we'd go into these meetings with scientists trying to explain what the RIC did and what the light source did, and and then Jack would just tell us. He was fantastic. So,
thanks, Chris. Thanks.
Just a couple comments. One, just to thank Laura for her partnership. It really has been, I think this has gone far beyond, and it has exceeded our expectations, but the time and effort you put into this has been terrific on all ends. I also wanted the board to know, the committee to know that Alan has $1 million of his money in the endowment.
Yes.
And then we've been doing a lot more fundraising, and Jim and Marilyn Simons have put a lot behind this as well. And also, it's hard to use words to emphasize the level of sophistication of the organizations that she put up on the board. Having had to work with Gates, and that's there might be a gold standard. That's the platinum standard, or whatever the next element is that we're going to value. It's unbelievable. These are rigorous, deep organizations, and if there's any question about the importance of this initiative, or is it valid, that's really the slide to look at. Those are serious organizations. So congratulations to you and everything that's coming. And we're excited about the future.
Today, after I leave you, I'm so glad I got the invitation for this before I booked my travel. I'm speaking at the Aspen Institute about science communication and what we need to do to really reach across differences and really at the heart of this, it's about making science matter and elevating people's sense of responsibility that science is part of our culture and our identities, and we need it to live the way that we can and should on this planet. So I'm extremely grateful. Like I said, I think I have the coolest job. Maybe
Okay,
not,
I'd like
but
to
I
go to
think so.
Aspen. Very cool. Any other questions, Laura? Thank you, Laura.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Pleasure.
And Michael, we've two presentations we've heard over the last couple of years. I think if we had the resources and the money, I would make every undergraduate take something like this. As Chris said, I've hired a lot of kids, most of them out of law school and things like that. You got to be able to communicate. And so, Yusuf, I would encourage you, as you go into the work world, to have something like this if you haven't already. And then that school in the journalism school about how to decipher legitimate information, especially in the world that we're living in now. I think those could be the two most practical courses for the kids to be taking today when they go out into the real world, to understand their sources of information, then being able to communicate. Just my 2 cents. Anybody have any other business they want to raise? Michael?
It's not so much business, but it's just looking at a valuable resource that we have out on the east end of the island, which is Stony Brook Southampton campus. And I just have to publicly thank Dr. Whalen for enabling, on Friday we had a training workshop on human trafficking. We had 3 Native women come and make that presentation, and without Matt and Dr. Reeves, but most importantly Laura Lyons, helping us organize that, and it kind of fits in where Dr. Laura was in terms of this community college relationship, and we just view out on our end of the island, we see the campus as such a valuable resource, and Dr. Reeves, when he was coming to a meeting here, I guess, that afternoon, he walked out and said the parking lot was absolutely full that day, and man, I just want to thank you for that. And make that happen.
Good. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Anybody else? Frank?
I recently attended the dedication and recognition of the MRI, and that was quite a magic moment, I think, for the university and for the family, and was just well done, and I think it was.
The IEEE, Important Society of Engineers, gave the distinction of recognizing Paul Lauterbach's invention of MRI as being one of the most important engineering feats. It's recognized by the Chemical Society as well, because Paul Lauterbach was doing his work as a chemist, I think, primarily. But it turns out that everything, the initial things all had to do with using nuclear magnetic resonance as a way to image. Turning it into a machine that actually now, the MRI that we all know, that many of us may have undergone, was also an incredible engineering feat as well. And so they wanted to honor that, and so we had the opportunity to bring a number of people together who were members of Paul Lauterbach's family. And so two of his daughters were able to attend. So it was spectacular. So really an important part of Stony Brook's identity was the work that he did and the Nobel Prize. He received today is the day the prize was given for physiology and medicine was just announced to Jim Allison and Professor Hanjo in Japan, both of whom worked in an area I know something about. And it's really incredible to think that, you know, a Stony Brook University faculty member created a discovery that led to the same Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology.
That's great. All right. Yusuf, anything? What do you think? You made it through your first meeting.
Interesting. I'm happy to be here though.
What's your major?
Business and political science, double major.
Very good. Very good. And you're a senior?
Yes.
Congratulations. Well, welcome aboard. Our next meeting is Monday, December 10th. Place and agenda to be determined. We won't be hearing from Susan. When are you leaving, actually?
November 30th, so you might
Oh, you
hear
might.
in preparation for that meeting.
Okay, so, but we wish you well, and Sam, anything else?
No, not at all. Not at all. As I said, State of University, Wednesday, 1 p.m.
I know I can't make it. We gonna hear anything there that we're not learning about today?
Lots of stuff actually, but we didn't talk about today. But I think, you know, most of the news is positive.
All right, very good. Tickets are going quickly, so. All right, so we'll adjourn and we will see you in December. All right, thank you all.